money, you know what it is. 2 for the show, yeah, we shut it down.
Brother Ramzu Yunus of Detroit, and we're gonna sit down with him today and get to know Brother Ramzu Yunus. He's been in headlines. Going way back to 2018, as far as I can see, and we want to um, bring him to the forefront today because he has a very big event taking place on June 25th, and that is in Jackson, Mississippi, and they are attempting to assert their right to self-determination. So, my brother, once again, thank you for joining me, and it's an honor to have you here with me today.
Thank you. It's an honor for you allowing me to be here. So appreciate that.
No problem, my brother. Unfortunately, since I've been here in Jackson, I have not heard much about this event. That's somewhat disappointing because of the gravity of the situation and the importance of what you're trying to accomplish here. I think it's really, really big. And so, for those of us who are not familiar with who you are and what you represent, go ahead and tell the people a little bit about yourself before we get down into the hard brass task questions.
All right. Yes. Well, I don't like to talk about myself. I always say I'm just a nobody trying to tell everybody that they are somebody and that together we can change everything for everybody. But I'm just Ramzu Yunus from North Carolina, a small town, North Carolina. And I early on in life, well, I call it the Malcolm X route, getting in trouble, went to prison at an early age as a teenager, got out in my early adulthood at 21 years old. In prison, like I said, the Malcolm X route, I became so-called conscious or woke, as they say nowadays. And once I got out of prison, of course, I was gung-ho. I was zealous to join the movement for the liberation of our people, for justice for Black people. I was too young to know exactly what to do, so I followed behind established leadership. And early on, I witnessed that not much was happening besides rhetoric. And as we say in the street, game recognizes game, so to speak. I know when somebody just running their mouths or they're going to be about that life. And I didn't see anybody really about that life that were leading the masses. To me, that's just my opinion. So I said, well, I'm not about talking, but I don't know what to do. I used to listen to speeches and for great speakers, and I always waited for the last 15 minutes to find out what the solution was. But all I heard was people articulating our problems. And so I said, well, since I don't know what to do, I'm only 21, 22 years old. I know that they're not going to do anything and lead us to do anything. So I set my sights on just moving to Africa. And in 2000, that's when I started going to Africa. The first trip was to Morocco, and then I found out what Mugabe was doing. President Robert Mugabe was doing in Zimbabwe. He was taking land back from the white settlers and giving it back to the people who it belonged to. And I said, well, that's where I'm going. So I ended up going to Zimbabwe and back and forth every year. And then a few years or several years later, I moved to Zimbabwe and began there, not knowing anyone. But after a while, I began working with the government, with the president himself. And through the president, I got to meet leaders of other governments, such as Hugo Chavez, the president of Venezuela. Then a few years later on down the line, things happened, and I decided to come back to America and start what we're doing now, the movement for self-determination, Black independence movement. And so that's where we are now. I'm here in America initiating the Black independence movement. Even though our movement has been for Black independence, it just seemed to have gone in another direction since the earlier leaders such as Marcus Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, the founders of the Republic of New Africa. All of those were saying the same thing that I'm just repeating, and that's we have a right to govern ourselves. And they also said we should host a referendum, a vote for independence amongst black people. And once black people decide to say yes, then we stand and take control over where we live. But that was never acted upon. So we are acting upon that now ourselves. So that movement was launched in Detroit in 2015, actually, but 2016 is when it really jumped off in Detroit, beginning in Highland Park. So that's who I am. Just came through that same, I call it the Malcolm X template of going to prison, becoming conscious, coming out back into the free world, and trying to do what I can do to make a difference and a change for my people.
So most people don't know that you're also an author. And I came across a book that you wrote, Prisons to Presidents. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Oh, yeah, that's my autobiography that I wrote, I think in 2013. This is my experience from prisons to president, being in prison, in a number of prisons. Those who may have been in that prison system or incarcerated, you may experienced it before. They ship you from prison to prison. I was in about 7 to 8 different prisons. So I said prisons to president. So from being an inmate in a prison to now sitting in meetings, one-on-one meetings with presidents. So I named the book Prisons to Presidents to go over my life growing up, my experiences through childhood and adulthood, and my experience in the struggle and engaging with presidents and those in leadership around the world.
And would you say that those experiences that you had with those presidents gave you the fortitude to become a diplomat and to be able to establish diplomacy to assert that right of self-determination?
I like to say what Dr. King said. He might have had another meaning. He said, I've been to the mountaintop. Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, taught us who followed those teachers in the Nation of Islam that the mountain symbolized government. So I always say I've been to the top and working with the top of government, meaning presidents of nations. So when you sit in those kind of offices and you see people looking like you that are actually running countries, running land, running territories, whether it be the president, the minister of defense, the minister of commerce, minister of trade, minister of petroleum, minister of mines, etc., you wonder, like, how did these guys get to this position? But you see that struggle that they went to because they were once colonized and ran by white people as well. So seeing all of that, then I said, well, since I've been to the mountaintop and was witnessing these things, I got it in my mind that no, I'm not going to be settled for anything less than being rulers as well. In America, we are basically domesticated. When you take a lion out of a jungle, of course, a lion at first wants to fight for its life, real life, not life for its physical life, but life of being the lion back in its own habitat where he is the king of that jungle. But then that lion is tamed by the trainer or by the zookeeper or whoever has captured the lion. And then, of course, when the lion has babies, cubs, or whatever you call baby lions, and they grow up and they have other babies, and all of them, they don't even know what it is like to rule the jungle. So they're just domesticated. So it's hard to spark an aspiration inside of those domesticated lions to want to be ruler of the jungle. They've never been a ruler of a jungle. They always have been in the zoo. That's most that they could do is growl when they get hungry for some meat, or try to encourage or influence the zookeeper to give them some extra meat if they feel they need extra. So they don't know anything about being the head of the jungle, the ruler of the jungle. Same thing as our people. We don't really know any other thing besides being the third-class citizens that we are, and we aspire to be a rich person. And the richest of us is still hundreds of times poorer than the richest of white people. So we don't aspire for anything. But being that I've seen and witnessed this, I got in my mind that no, we should accept nothing less than governing ourselves, by ruling ourselves, by being the kings of the jungle once again. And so that inspired me by just being in those environments, engaging and working with different governments of people who look like us that were also once conquered by Europeans or white people. So that sparked me to want to build our own mountain right here in America where we live.
You mentioned Republic of New Africa, and your path here today with the right to self-determination is eerily similar to the path that the Republic of New Africa took and embarked upon. They started in Detroit and they ended in Jackson, Mississippi. Were you aware of those similarities, and what's your take on that?
Oh yes, I'm aware of those similarities. Some of people, especially well, in particular white people down here in different groups of white people, think that we are them, and especially because we come from Detroit as well. You know, the mayor and his family, they came from Detroit. The Republic of New Africa was founded in Detroit, but they didn't choose Detroit as a place for Black independence. They formed in Detroit, but they chose to be independent, to claim the five southern states, with South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana as their place of statehood, nationhood. So there are similarities, and they also said that they were going to have a vote or a plebiscite amongst the people of those five states. The same thing that we're doing. We're holding vote. We had a vote in Detroit, a referendum. We're holding one in Jackson as well. That's the procedure. So all peoples have taken that Republic of New Africa route because they got it from other peoples, because that's the international procedure for a people that say they want to be liberated. You can't just say, I want to be liberated and scream Black power. What steps are you going to take to liberate yourself? And if you don't take those steps to liberate yourself, then you can't blame your enemy for being in control over you or being an oppressive power over you. So yeah, there are similarities because it's the same route that all peoples take. It's the same international procedure that peoples take for liberation, as far as the steps that Republic of New Africa announces or they have intended in their mission statement. But the similarities for Detroit, there are definitely there.
So, are you do you know if the Republic of New Africa is still in existence and operating as an organization, or it just died out after the raid in Jackson?
No, the Republic of New Africa is still in existence. I don't know if they have a strong membership or an engagement in within the city of Jackson, but they definitely are still around.
And so, have you collaborated with them recently, or are you in contact with any of the members to help um, push your movement forward?
Oh yes, I've spoken with them a number of times. The president, vice president, and other members of the Republic of New Africa House. But I don't know what to say about what happened of those just discussed it, and some feel that what I'm doing is premature. They feel they should spend more time. I don't know how much time we should keep spending. See, that organization was founded in 1968, but that's there. We need to do more training, and they need to get the organization together. I don't know what reasons they have for not engaging in what we're doing, but they don't think they're ready for it. So there's some hangups in participating and doing. And I'm all about engaging and unite others. Think that it's not time to do anything.
And speaking on the Republic of New Africa, history, tends to repeat itself. And so you mentioned that Republic of New Africa, as well as Republic for Jackson and Republic of Detroit, were basically operating on the same premises to assert their right to self determination. And so, do you think that the Republic of New Africa failed, or it was just curtailed? What do you think stopped the momentum that they had?
Well, like Hitler said, he gave a suggestion. He said, demoralize your enemy through sabotage, assassination, etc. That is the war of the future. So, the United States, following that pattern or that model of demoralization, they sabotaged Black organizations, assassinated Black leaders, and sabotage can come in the way of assassination, but also through incarceration, wrongful convictions of members. And so Republic of New Africa, like many other groups, they suffered those sabotages of their organization. So that those things can demoralize people. So now those who come after them, they don't want to go that route. Who wants to be in prison? Like some Republic of New Africa members are still in prison now, 40, 50 years or so. Who wants to be in prison that long? Who wants to be assassinated? Such radical actions. So that fear, that trauma would be within them. They're traumatized, and that fear is there to keep the organization stagnant from making the proposed actions or those actions that are part of the mission statement.
And so would you say that the biggest hang up or the biggest obstacle that you have to deal with today is COINTELPRO? Because that, from my understanding, the history of Republic of New Africa, COINTELPRO was one of the reasons why they were raided and basically shut down.
COINTELPRO is not an obstacle. The obstacle is our fear. You know, that someone like, let's say, for instance, the Vietnam Revolution with Ho Chi Minh. He was a fearless guy. He was smaller than anybody I know. Smaller than my daughter, probably. He was probably no more than 80 pounds. And the rest of those Vietnam, they were small people. But they were willing, as he said, we're willing to give 10 lives for every one of your life. So they kill somebody, kill a Vietnamese, bomb just quit and say, oh, he didn't kill some of us, and so we're going to re-strategize and do something else that's safer. They didn't do that. They kept on with the struggle. So it wasn't a CIA or the American government, or the French government and their intelligence agencies that were an obstacle to the revolution. No, they put forth or put ingrained in the people, instilled in the people a sense of fear. And that became the obstacle. So now the obstacle is people fear to make moves. They know what the right thing to do is. Republic of New Africa been saying it since 1968. But why are you not doing it? It's fear that keeps actions from being taken. I just found out in 2018, it was revealed through Wesley Muhammad that the Minister Louis Farrakhan said that Elijah Muhammad told them to have a vote, and that had to be at least 8 years ago, because he died in 75. He said to have a vote as well, because that's the procedure. But when you challenge the United States as far as power, you want to take 50 million black people independent and having their own power, that's the biggest challenge to the white man. Not calling him a devil, not saying black power, calling him a pig and rallying and marching and agitating, actually standing up and taking power. They fear that's the thing that's most feared by the government. You're going to face the most pushback. So people are afraid of that pushback, but they know that is the only guarantee for us is our own governance. Is the right of self-determination being asserted. But the fear, that is the obstacle. CIA, COINTELPRO, that's not an obstacle.
Okay, thank you for that. So if COINTELPRO is not an obstacle, what will it take for, what do you think it would take for our people to release their fear or get over their fear? Is there anything that you can think of that you can do to relax their fear, to garner confidence in what you're doing, and so that they can get behind you with full support?
The masses of people may keep that fear. It's just those who are in the vanguard that's supposed to be fearless and look fearless and talk fearless, that are supposed to be the ones who are fearless and stand up. And the rest of the people, the 85%, as some may call it, then they will have confidence in knowing that, look, we have a strong force standing up for us. So the only way to get rid of that fear, as the Bible says, a perfect love casteth out all fear. Do you really love your people enough? Now, I know if my daughter fell in the lion's den, now I wouldn't face no lion. I know I can't beat a lion. But if my daughter fell in the lion's pit, because of my love for her, I'm jumping in that lion's pit for my daughter. Now, if somebody I really don't know fell in the lion's pit, I still might think twice. I may not even jump in there, because I don't have a perfect love for that person. But the same situation exists That same situation exists amongst us. Do we have enough love for ourselves, our kind, to actually put our lives on the line? So that love, if we had that kind of love, we'd jump in that lion's pit against the United States government that many of us fear so much. But we don't have that love. And also, sometimes you have to be backed up against a wall where all you can do is resist. Some of us have read The Art of War by Sun Tzu. He said sometimes when the soldiers are too demoralized to fight, then they have to be backed up against a wall where they have to fight. So also the situation is developing in America amongst Black people. If it's not here already amongst Black people, that we have to do something because we don't know where we're going to be living next month. I ran into people today, a whole block of where they're going to be living in the next coming months because some white organization has bought out their block and they got to go. So now they have nothing to do but stand up and say, look, we're going to assert our right of self-determination, take over the city and these properties because they have nothing else to do. No other option. So when we realize that we, as a people, that awareness that we don't have any other option, then people will stand up. They don't have to stand up and say, look, I'm willing to give my life and die for this cause, but they will at least stand up and say, look, I give my consent. I withdraw my consent from that system, and I stand in support of those who are fearless enough to physically resist if they have to the American government in order to assert our right to govern ourselves, our right of self-determination. So no, I can't influence the masses to be fearless, but sometimes circumstances will influence them and can influence them more than me as a person trying to get people emotionally worked up to be fearless.
Right. So in 1957, Queen Mother Moore petitioned the United Nations to give us reparations, and she gave them a bill of $200 billion. And I know that you and your organization right now are working under the premise that the United Nations says you have a human right to assert the right to self-determination. So if we had to go to the UN if we have to go to the UN again and petition the UN again, the way Queen Mother Moore did in 1957, what would that price tag be? It was 200 billion then. What do you think that price tag should be right now?
I don't put a price tag on reparations because reparations is the repair of a people. And the first part of that repair is restoring them back to self-government. That doesn't require a dollar to do that. You just stand up and take control of where you live. And that's the the main part of reparations. And I don't believe in petitioning the UN. The UN, you could petition some organization to make your right be enjoyed. You have to assert your right. It's like me petitioning the UN for my right to remain silent. What can they do? Just shut up, Ramzu. Remain silent. That's your right. So how can I petition the UN for my reparations when it's a right that I have? You understand? The first point of reparations is self-determination. I can do that myself. And once I have that self-determination, because it's a political decision, now I'm in political control. And now, being a political decision, that government will utilize its resources to give us compensation, monetary compensation, which people are erroneously calling reparations. But now, because we're the government and we control the assets, we can give ourselves monetary compensation as well. We don't have to wait for a merciless people. That's like us bowing down, waiting, praying, thinking we're praying to an angel. We're going to answer a prayer of the righteous. We'd be fool to think Satan will answer the prayers of the righteous when the righteous can stand up and answer their own prayers.
I seen that you attempted to establish a bank, and the name of the bank was Reparations Bank. And the Superior Court in DeKalb County did a judgment against you all and said the Reparations Bank, and said that you had to cease and desist because you were operating without a bank charter. So if you had the right to self-determination in your own government, you would not need the United States permission or a charter per se to hold the people's funds. Is that what you're saying when you're saying you remove yourself from government? So we don't have those obstacles again?
Exactly. We won't have those obstacles. And that was not about, I wasn't trying to open a bank. They was talking about using the name bank. I called it reparations bank, but it wasn't a bank. We didn't take any deposits. We're saying we're using a digital format, just like a digital wallet, to distribute funds to the people. Digital funds is not even US dollars, amongst ourselves and trade amongst ourselves. So that wasn't had nothing to do with the United States bank in the traditional sense. They was just talking about using the word bank, which they got food banks. They use the word bank as well, but they're not taking anybody's funds. They got blood banks. They're not using anybody's. They didn't get a license to use blood bank or food bank. It doesn't have anything to do with US currencies. But that was just something the ops they were throwing out there, and also to try to paint a bad picture. So when somebody Googles, they see, oh, they got a judgment against them, a cease and desist order. That's part of the media's or the government's game, utilizing the media to defame and take down and destroy the character of those who are in opposition, who don't represent the government's interest.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit. It sort of kind of ties into what you were just saying. Tell the audience about the North Atlantic Peace Organization.
Well, the North Atlantic Peace Organization, that is a organization that was formed by myself and some players on the international scene, Africa as well as Russia, in a effort to unite our strengths to go against the superpowers who oppress people. We call it NAPO. They call theirs NATO. There's the North Atlantic, called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was first began by America and Great Britain, the United Kingdom. So-called, the reason that they used was to defend themselves from any attacks from Russia. But it was supposed to be a defense organization, but it has metamorphed into not being just a defense organization, but as an organization of control and imperialism around the planet. It was NATO that went in and attacked Gaddafi and killed Gaddafi and destroyed Libya because Gaddafi wanted to make Africa powerful. That was a NATO action that utilized that excuse. It was NATO and those different same countries that went into many other nations in Africa, interfered in the Middle East as well because of their interests. So it originally was an organization for defense, uniting together to defend each other, but now has become an organization headed by the United States, and no longer just United States and the United Kingdom, but United States and many other European countries as well. And they're trying to, of course, recruit Ukraine into that fold as we speak. So we formed NAPO to say, look, we're going to counter their power by uniting not governments of these countries together against the United States and Britain and imperialist powers, but unite the people themselves. So formed that organization to bring peoples of Africa, people together in a strength and a strong bond and strong alliance, politically and militarily, against our common enemy. I have a common enemy with Russia. America's a common enemy because we are trying to assert our right of self-determination. And those who know international law know that when you are trying to assert your right of self-determination and that any government tries to forcibly deny you that, then you have a right to ally with others to oppose that opposition or resist the opposition to you asserting that right of self-determination. So we have a right to actually ally with Russia. They can't get us like they got people such as for being agents of a foreign country. We can align with anybody, Al-Qaeda, if we had to stop the forcible denial of our right of self-determination. And those who have witnessed what has went on in Detroit, you've seen the violent repression of what we are doing in Detroit. So by any means necessary, that's not just Malcolm X is saying. It didn't even come from Malcolm X. That's international law. You have a right by any means necessary to destroy or defeat an enemy that tries to deny your self-determination. So we formed NAPO to create that alliance globally to represent each other's interests. Our interest is our self-determination. Others' interests may be counter or balancing the global power, so the United States won't be the only one that is powerful and be able to dictate how the world runs. So that's what NAPO was formed for, just a global alliance to be strong enough to counter the imperialist goals of the United States, France, and those other European nations.
You mentioned Russia as an ally, and there was an article written by a young lady by the name of Shannon Bond, and she titled her article "A Pro-Russia Social Media Campaign for Detroit Independence," which was a question, and she says how Russia repackages propaganda campaigns across the globe. Um, and in that article, she mentioned what you all were doing in establishing the Republic of Detroit. Is that, do you think that's a fair assessment to say that what you have going on is nothing but a Russian propaganda campaign?
Russia didn't know anything about us until a year or so ago, and we've been doing this since 2015. Of course, when they find out about it, any movement for independence within your enemy is a asset to you. My enemy's enemy is my friend. The United States plays the same foreign policy itself. They go by the same foreign policy rules itself. So if Russia or anybody sees, even if they don't love black people, if they see someone inside of America standing up to take independent control of black people will significantly weaken America, then of course they would support that. So some people that are associated with Russia begin championing that and just sharing the media with others. They didn't give us any assignment to go on or to promote any propaganda for them. You don't see us promoting any pro-Russian propaganda or marching with signs saying Russia is right. We support Russia and the Ukrainian thing. No, we support self-determination, and we invite Russia to come and help us because it's their right to. And it would be an advantage for them to help us as well.
So when you say it would be an advantage to them, what's the advantage?
Anything that will weaken your enemy is an advantage to you. So of course we are the strongest people in America. America is built off us and it's sustained from us. Now, if black people stand up and go independent, and we are probably 1,200 or more areas in this country, that means America breaks up and becomes weak, just like America promoted the breaking up of the Soviet Union so that they can become weak. Now, America will break up as well and become weak. So, of course, it would be an interest to any nation, Russia or any other nation, that America is an enemy to them.
So you have the organization Republic. I'm sorry, what was it called? North Atlantic Peace Organization. Tell us about Lou Michael of Eurasian Organization for Democracy and Elections, and how did that partnership come about?
Well, that partnership, Cal, where he witnessed what we were doing. Luc Michel, or however you want to pronounce his name, the head of the Eurasian Observatory for Democracy and Election. That organization monitors elections around the world. That organization makes sure that those elections are ran according to international standards. And when those referendums, elections and referendums, so they may monitor a presidential election to say, okay, this presidential election was free and fair. They also will monitor a referendum that an oppressed people may have a referendum or a vote for independence to break away from their oppressor. Then that organization, the Eurasian Observatory for Democracy, monitor that and make sure they are following the correct procedure for independence. And if that procedure is validated by them, then the global community will say, okay, it was monitored by a respectable organization, so it's a respectable election or a referendum, and it can't be questioned. So that's what their organization does. It has monitored elections of Crimea, Donbass region in Ukraine, whether it be Donetsk People's Republic and other republics in that European area or Eurasian area, and it also has monitored elections in Africa as well. So being that organization does such, and the organization is an imperialist organization, and Luc Michel has been an anti-imperialist activist for decades. when he witnessed what we were doing in Detroit, someone actually standing up to the great superpower and declaring independence, he had no other, not choice, but he was motivated and happy to assist and promote such a thing. So we struck a relationship based on our commonality of an enemy, the same enemy.
So when you were in Detroit, were
Imperialism.
you able to have that referendum vote?
As you may have witnessed on a number of our videos, we had that vote a number of times. It was violently repressed. We suffered violent repression at the hands of the Detroit government. People were beat up by police. People were arrested. People were threatened with arrest. Anything that can discourage the masses from standing up. We were unlawfully defamed as well. They told lies about us in the media, but that's part of their political warfare too. It's part of hybrid warfare, which includes political warfare and fake news. So they use that as well against us. So we did have that referendum. We had thousands and thousands of people voting in Detroit, but political repression and violent political repression by the government demoralized some people and discouraged participation. So now that they have forcibly denied us a certain our right of self-determination, now we have a right to engage them by any means necessary. And we're developing that. Many of the organizations that say they stand for Black power, stand for nationalism, they are afraid to take such a stance, even though they know that it's lawful. So we have to build our own capacity as a little small David that may not be as popular as the other forces. So we have to stand as a little humble small David as our small organization to defeat Goliath, and Goliath will be defeated.
So that movement is still going on in Detroit.
Oh, it's still going very strong in Detroit. It's still going very strong.
Very good. Thank you for clarifying that. Because now you're in Jackson, Mississippi, and on tomorrow, June 25th, we're going to have another referendum vote. How many signatures are you anticipating in tomorrow's vote?
I don't know. We have been campaigning as hard as we can. As the scripture says, the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. So it's easy to, our message resonates with people. When you say, look, you all, we're going to govern ourselves and be independent of racist white control. And besides being free of racist white control, all of the empty properties, we have free housing for all. We'll be able to leverage assets and give ourselves monetary reparations. Give them the good news, as Jesus said in the Bible. So we give the good news to the people, and it resonates with them. But unfortunately, we don't have the media power to reach everybody. So we have to do sweat and tears. We have to go out in the community and try to spread the word as much as we can. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. So everybody that we did talk to, it resonated with them, but we have yet to see how far those seeds have spread throughout the city. We've been throughout the city. We don't know how the seeds we spread were germinated and caused other seeds to spread elsewhere amongst their families and friends of those who we have talked to. But we're definitely expecting if not a quick victory, but a eventual victory, because we know our message resonates, and it's something that's the only solution that Jackson, as well as Black people all over America, have.
There is Senate Bill 2343 that will take into effect here in Jackson, Mississippi on July 1st. How do you think that bill, if it's allowed to stand, will affect future gatherings of individuals who are looking to assert their right of self-determination?
I mean, it will cause the police to come down and try to repress those gatherings. That's why we have to stop that bill. That's why we have to stop what's going on, period. But it's up to the people of Jackson to stop that bill. And that's what this assertion of the right of self-determination defeats that bill. If the people voice their political will to assert their right of self-determination, then, or their human right to assert their right of self-determination, then we will stop those bills. We wouldn't care about those. Those bills are null and void. And if they try to oppose or forcibly come upon, forcibly deny us that right of self-determination, which includes those rights to assemble, do what we have to do, even if it means war. But the people of Jackson, these organizations that are always rallying and marching and protesting and stuff, they should be standing with us as well. They're trying to defeat these bills through civil actions, through lawsuits, but they're losing lawsuit after lawsuit. They are losing when they can simply stand up and assert their right of self-determination. As Malcolm said, and then Martin Luther King said right before he died, move away from those civil rights, because as Malcolm said, you're in their courts. You're taking the criminal to his own court. But in human rights, you're outside of their jurisdiction and you do what you have a right to do. And so that's what we are proposing to the people to do. And those organizations who will be affected by that, because they're the only ones to be out there protesting, they seem not to want to stand and go against the big bad wolf. So it'd be their fault if they're not allowed to gather and protest anymore.
So basically what you're saying is that Jackson Undivided Coalition, those are the individuals that are suing Mississippi over SB 2343. Are you saying that they're not looking to align with you, or are they aware of what you're trying to do?
They are very aware, very aware, very aware. Seem to be running like roaches when the lights cut on from what we're doing. But if you go to their page, you probably sure you have been. You see, they even mentioned the word self-determination, political self-determination. But if you talk about self-determination and in the same paragraph talk about voting and petitioning and suing the government, you just contradicted yourself. Because with self-determination, you don't have to petition, protest, and appeal to the oppressive civil government for your rights. You just assert your rights and take control. And they know what we're doing, but they don't want to. They want to keep engaging in those protests, civil rights actions. They want to file civil suits like they did through the ACLU, which is probably the biggest civil rights legal organization. 309 million budget they had last year or the year before last. And they lost the lawsuit because it's a civil lawsuit. But even the ACLU, if you go to their website and just Google ACLU, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, they, through their website, would tell you that the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights is the supreme law of the United States. So if that's the supreme law and the number one thing it protects is the right of self-determination, why didn't they utilize the right of self-determination in that lawsuit, or just assert that right instead of going through a civil case that they knew they were going to lose, and they did lose, which we knew they did lose. Maybe they had some false hope. But we talk about a guarantee when you assert your right of self-determination. So Jackson Undivided, those groups know about us, but they don't want to touch what we're doing. Some of them are trying to engage in politics. They're running for office in the same organization like the House of Representatives that passed the bill. So you're going to run to be a member of somebody who just shot your daddy, so to speak. You want to run to be a part of an organization of somebody who just hung your mama on a tree. That's what they're doing. So they want to keep engaging in civil rights actions, which are, I'm not saying some of them are not sincere, but they are foolish.
Roger that. Wow. So it's no way that you guys can come together on this. It would seem that we could do both. You could do both, like, have your silver suit at the same time. Jackson United Coalition.
There's no such thing. It's not no such thing. That's no such thing. They wouldn't show up for nothing like that. They wouldn't show up. And I refuse to show up for any of their things anymore. It's like this, sister. That's why Dr. King, many of us who are listening, we need to Google and read the transcript of Dr. King's meeting in 1967 in Frogmore, South Carolina. He had a strategy meeting with his organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That strategy was for them to move, he said, from civil rights to human rights. He said we must go from an era of reform to revolution. Then he said, I think we must see the great distinction between a reform movement and a revolutionary movement. So how can I sit at the table with a reform movement that still believes that this devil can become an angel? I can't sit with you because you're a performer, an insane act thinking that the devil can become an angel, meaning that this system can be reformed. When this same system says you have a right I'd rather go ahead and govern myself instead of trying over and over again to get the devil to become an angel. Doesn't that make sense? So I can't sit with you if you're going left and I want to go right. That I'll end up splitting my body in half. I can't split my body in half. I don't have that kind of power. Maybe if I become a Superman, some kind of superhero, I can do that kind of stuff. But I can't do that. And as a people, we can't split ourselves. We can't be double-minded, trying to wanting reform and working with reform and then wanting revolution, a complete change in governance of ourselves. So no, we can't sit together. We can take a picture together and look good, but there's nothing functional that we can do to effect, because they will negate what I'm doing because I'm trying to govern self, but they want me to bow down to the white man to continue oppressively governing me. Doesn't make sense, and I will never participate with anybody to do such a thing. I won't even mock and curse my ancestors by doing that. I won't curse Malcolm X by doing that. I won't curse Fred Hampton by doing that. I won't curse Martin Luther King by doing that. I won't curse Harriet Tubman by doing that. So I refuse to do anything like that. So I can't unite with you. I can take a picture and smile and shake your hand, but I can't do anything with you. Probably won't even shake your hand. Because you are now my enemy, because you're trying to go left where you know right is the only way we have that is guaranteed to get our people some justice.
Well said, my brother. So if we switch gears to talking about how we sustain a Republic of Jackson. Any government takes funds and finances to do so. The great Marcus Garvey started invested in ships so that we can do commerce with Africa. Now we have what we call cryptocurrency, and we're doing trade online rather than via big vessels, right? How do you see Central Republic of Africa? How do you combine Central Republic of Africa with your efforts here in America with Republic of Detroit and also Republic of Jackson? Is that an ongoing relationship, or is that something that's still in the works?
Well, everything is a work in progress until we have complete self-determination, or we have realized self-determination. But while we're in the midst of taking actions to enjoy our self-determination, it's always good to have relationships. So I've just made those relationships with the Central African Republic government, its president. So and it's always good to have relationships to be able to link in the future and combine efforts for a better multipolar world. So that's the purpose of that relationship. And all African countries, or any country in the world, would benefit from our actions in America, politically as well as economically, because economically, we are the financial superpower of America. I'm not talking about the $1.4 trillion we spend. Human capital. Human capital means every individual is worth $10 million. That's how much we can produce throughout our lifetimes through labor, through mind power. $10 million. So times 10 million by 50 million black people. That's like, what, 50 trillion or something like that. Don't get me wrong, but that's a lot of money. But just the assets that we control as far as real estate value where black people live is worth over $15 trillion. So we have real estate value, we have human capital. So we have $1 trillion or maybe a quadrillion dollar economy ourselves if we decide to take independent political control where we live. So then we become the superpower. And with such assets, a city like, for instance, California, Los Angeles has about $5 trillion in real estate value alone. You can take $500 billion, even less, and finance the development of the whole Africa. You see, so now we can assist in development of these countries, not go develop mines there so we can take their resources, but no, put some sustainable development in those countries. And first of all, amongst ourselves where we live in America, no, we can be self-sufficient. We don't have to even trade with others. We produce everything that we need ourselves. And that's the purpose of many nations. That's their intent, to be self-sufficient, where they don't need outside help. They don't need a U.S. dollar, and that's why countries that have tried to become self-sufficient, the United States, have went in and sabotaged their government through various means, including assassination of their leaders. So that relationship is being developed as we speak with many nations. And of course, once we establish our self-determination fully, then we will be in relations with all nations of the world, the majority of nations who are at odds and who don't agree with America's foreign policy.
So you would say that trading with other nations is not necessarily needed for us in America to achieve self-determination. We don't need to trade, or how would we sustain our own economy?
Like I said, we have these assets already. We have, for instance, like Detroit, $600 billion in real estate value alone, $70 trillion in value if you include the fresh water source from that Detroit River. So all of those assets are there. We can leverage some of those assets or sell out those assets and take those, just a few $1 billion, and make Detroit self-sufficient. $250 million can give us free electricity forever in Detroit. About 230 million here in Jackson, Mississippi. So we just leverage those assets and create industries, sustainable industries. And now we don't need anything. We produce our own food, produce our own clothing. We already got shelter that we can repair, and we could even, they got machines that recycle bricks. So we can do all of those things ourselves. We don't need to trade with another nation. We just have to stand up and take control over these assets that are around us already.
So when we were talking about the reparations bank,
Mm-hmm.
that was your intent with that, was not to create a chartered bank, like you said, but was for us to trade amongst each other, correct? So if the fiat dollar goes away, then it would be imperative that the Republic of Jackson or the Republic of Detroit come up with some type of currency.
Mm-hmm.
We or are we going to go back to bartering? Is that so? What does that look like? Yeah.
That's why you've probably seen the app we have, the Jackson Money app, with that 17,000 we telling people that they can get. For instance, if we're the government and we take control of the city, which we will, and these hundreds of billions of dollars of assets, we can leverage those assets. For instance, I leverage some assets and we can create for $50 million, we can create a facility to grow foods for about 3 Jacksons. You see? So now once we grow food for the city, we have outlets that we can sell that food to. And they say, okay, what will you accept for this? For instance, we grow some tomatoes. You come to us with some tomatoes. We just gave you an app with 17,000 credits that we have, our own currency. And now that tomato may cost 3 of those credits, that bag of tomatoes. So you transfer that to us for those tomatoes. We just created our own currency out of thin air because we have something that we utilize our resources to grow or to produce. So we don't have to utilize anybody else's money. We just created our own money to circulate. We'll take some of these assets that we have, like real estate assets in the city, and create factories that not only where we can create farms to grow cotton, we can also create factories that recycle the clothing that we have on and make new cotton out of the old clothing that we have. And now we produce our own clothing, and that clothing is sold in Jackson. And now you are buying clothing from that same money that we put in that app for you to utilize. So now that money has value. And because I know I can buy food and clothing with that money, I will use my human capital, my ability to do electrical wiring. I'll use my ability to, if I can cut hair for some of that new currency that we created. So now it is valuable and it's our own.
When we're talking about forming a nation, it's going to be, it looks like what you're trying to do is form a nation within the nation. So does the nation that you're attempting to form, the Republic of Jackson, do they have a constitution that's separate or different from the constitution that's in the Republic of Detroit, or are they're both working under the same constitution, or is there a constitution?
I mean, most constitutions have the same skeletal format, you know, and they have about the same Bill of Rights in them. Just certain policies that may change in within the codes, but most constitutions are basically the same, whether it's in Asia, in Africa, America, or South America. So the framework is already there. They'll just be altered a little bit.
There was a plebiscite vote that took place, I believe, in last year in New York, and from what my understanding, the vote went well, and basically they were left with one thing to do, and that's just assert their right to self-determination. Do you know what happened with that vote and why individuals that's in that tri-state of New York area didn't go forth and just assert their rights after they had that vote?
I'm not familiar with that, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. I know
Okay.
one reason why people may not assert their right is they may not have the capacity to actually take control. They would need that's when a collective organizations, especially those who are militant and want to be or give the semblance of a military, need to stand up and become the force. Like any government has a police force to make sure those policies are able to be implemented in that city or in that territory, and any violations addressed. So, and to assert your control over a city, you have to have a great plan, and you should have a force to be able to protect that assertion. So maybe they don't have that force. So we have to stand up fearlessly and take that kind of action.
The Republic of New Africa had consulates set up around the United States. Are you looking to do something similar so that it's just not just uh, Republic of Detroit, Republic of Jackson? You know, we're doing it like one state at a time. Do you have any plans to form consulates in other states?
That's a good question. So, of course, if Black people remain oppressed in other parts of the country, we have to have, I would call, agents in those, or agencies or entities or even individuals in those areas to represent us, at least represent our movement. What can I say? Our interest in those areas. But our interest in those areas would be not to trade with those or do anything in those areas. Would be to liberate those people and to give them guidance to follow the same procedures that we followed. But we want it to actually to be this is a liberation movement, and we don't want to be symbolic. We want to be functional. We have a lot of symbolic things. We have a lot of symbolic organizations call themselves nations, but don't seek to actually be a nation beyond word and rhetoric. So we have to actually, when we put councils in place, we actually are saying that we do have a territory that we control for us to be able to deploy consulates or emissaries.
I'm going to circle back on the conversation of reparations because I think this may tie into where the UN gets their pledge of acknowledging the right to self determination through because it's a human rights concept, right? So we if we think about the construct of why the UN established a human rights division, and they give individuals a mandate, so to speak, to just go out and assert it. When you do achieve this in Jackson and in Detroit, what does that tell the UN? Is or does their opinion, does it even matter if they see that you've done it because they say go out and do it? What How do we get protection or support to keep to prevent what happened to the new Republic of New Africa? They were raided and things of that nature. Can the
Mhm.
UN help with your mission and provide you some protection for retaliation from the United States because you asserted your right to self determination?
If they want to, the UN can help, but really it will be individual nations that are members of the UN, like Russia, like China, like Iran, like nations that would want to strike America anyway. Now they have an excuse to strike America because America just violated our right of self-determination by trying to forcibly deny that right. But I wouldn't go expecting the UN to do anything for us as a entity itself, as the United Nations. They just acknowledge the right of self-determination. They don't give us the right of self-determination. They just put it in documents and had all the nations agree to something that's a God-given natural right of people. But far as hoping for protection from them, I don't place my hope in the United Nations. I place my hope in anybody, any nation. But those nations do have a right. Once we assert self-determination, they don't have a right to intervene in our affairs if we are not trying to assert the right of self-determination. That would be interfering in civil affairs of a nation. So if any organization is engaging in civil protests or civil actions, even if it's civil resistance against the government, if it's not them trying to govern themselves, then other nations don't have the legality or legal right, the right to interfere with American affairs. And they have agreed to that. But when we are trying to assert our right of self-determination, they try to forcibly deny that, then they can come to help. So we can't compare ourselves to the repression of the Republic of New Africa. They expressed and other organizations have expressed their stance or expressed their intent to be self-determined and to assert their right of self-determination. But I don't think when the police may have did something against them that was wrong, I don't think they were in the midst of asserting that right. They may have been doing other things.
Well, I think it was a raid on when they had their anniversary.
Well,
They were meeting, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They were meeting. They held a meeting and they raided them. I couldn't find any reason why they raided them, why they arrested them, other than the fact that they were there gathered and were speaking on the right to self-determination. So,
Yeah.
I don't understand why I don't understand why they were raided and then let go. They say they murdered the cop and then they were acquitted of charges. So why were they there in the first place? And that's another question, my brother. That's not for you. That's just something that was going on in my mind. Tell the listening audience what should we expect on June 25th at 9 a.m. downtown Jackson, Mississippi.
I mean, we will be holding a referendum inviting the citizens to stand up and vote for their independence and rally in support for this humanitarian intervention that we are embarking upon. We all have a right to just stop human rights abuses, whether it's a referendum for independence or it's just stopping the housing crisis, the humanitarian crisis that the people are put in within the system, such as homelessness, such as perpetual poverty. We have a right to intervene and stop that. That's called humanitarian intervention. Individuals, groups, and organs of society all have a right to promote human rights. So as a group called Human Rights Policy Officers, we would be intervening as well, besides asserting the right of self-determination, but we're intervening and we're going to stop this housing crisis amongst ourselves and these human rights abuse that are amongst our community. So they can expect us to have a referendum and we move forward from there by occupying this city, putting people in homes, eradicating the abuse of the people's right to adequate housing.
And for the people who are not here in Jackson, Mississippi, but want to support and help you financially, can you tell us where we could go and support you?
That's a good question. We have a self-determination Cash App. It's the Cash App sign, self-determination. We have a GoFundMe that you may be able to share the link later on. We have a GoFundMe as well for those who want to assist. But the biggest assistance will actually come from boots on the ground and people standing up to assert that right. But we do have those avenues to assist financially as well.
And when you say come in and support you, is it fair to say that if I live in Texas, I can come to Jackson, Mississippi and sign the referendum, or is only for the residents of Jackson, Mississippi?
If you're going to occupy Jackson, you have a right to sign the referendum. But look, you're in this territory and you're going to be occupying this place as well. So you have a political voice on the territory where you are.
Okay. So you mentioned the GoFundMe. Can you give us the name of that page?
I do not know the name of that GoFundMe page.
So
I know
can
it's
we
on
just,
my
I'm
yeah,
sorry, go
it's
ahead.
on. I know it's on my Facebook
Okay.
profile or down in the feed or whatever you want to call it. But we will share that once we get
Okay.
it inside
Okay.
the tree.
Roger that. Roger that. So we have you have the vote on June 25th, 9 a.m., downtown Jackson, Mississippi. And your last words for the audience will be what, Mr. Eunice?
You have what's called a right of self-determination, audience. If you don't like the way you're being governed, if you hate police brutality, if you hate wrongful conviction, if you think we deserve monetary reparations, if you want justice for black people, the only guaranteed way for you to get that is by asserting your right of self-determination. How do you assert your right of self-determination? You collectively a vote amongst your people where you live, a vote for independence away from this system to govern yourselves. And if everybody says yes or a majority says yes, then you just take control. Take control. That's your right of self-determination. You're either going to assert that because it's the only guaranteed solution. You may fear it even if you know it's the only guaranteed solution. And if so, then just remain in the condition that we are in and stop crying and complaining so much. But I love you all, and I hope you all develop enough love to cast away any fear that you may have of asserting what you are right.
My brother Ramzu Eunice, thank you so much for being with me and sharing your thoughts and opinions. I wish you much success on tomorrow. I will be there with the camera to capture the whole thing if that's allowed,
Yes,
if you like, and then I'll share that footage with you as well. Like I said, it's an honor to be able to speak with you, and I love your spirit. I support what you're doing, and I look forward to seeing you on tomorrow. Until then, my friend, you be blessed.
yeah, be blessed. Shalom. Salute.
Shalom. Salute. And that was Mr. Ramzu Eunice of Republic of Detroit and Republic of Jackson. We will be there to cover that very, very important vote on tomorrow with the citizens of Jackson, Mississippi. I pray that this video gave you more insight to Mr. Ramzu Eunice and his quest to liberate the African American people living here in the United States under the guise of right to self-determination. I'm Achoti Tamar. Thank you for listening. Be blessed. Shalom.